Hello class, happy week 8. I'm just finishing up my first week here in upstate New York in the Albany-Saratoga area where I grew up. Couldn't believe that it's actually hot up here, like really hot. I even got sunburn. Well, I hope you're all doing well and had a good 4th of July holiday. From what I could see, about half of you are done with the midterm, and pretty good. A couple of you not so good, so hopefully the rest of you do well. I don't think it was too bad or much of a surprise. Maybe just some different phrasing of questions. But so this week I have already sent you out a homework template for the Quiz 8 homework. And so topically we get into the concept of hypothesis testing. Really all that means is in the world of research and data analysis, you already have a set of preconceived questions, whether you realize it or not. And that's where this concept of hypothesis are, because that's all it is. A hypothesis is a question. So the two questions, just generically speaking, that you're going to have is, did things stay the same or did something different happen? And so we'll use terms like the null hypothesis. Your null hypothesis, the easiest way to think of that is no. Null means no. There's no difference. It's a given for any analytic process or even project or intervention you can do. Nothing can happen. Now, a little caveat to that. The null hypothesis could be if the opposite occurs, so something less of happens or something more happens. That in turn can be construed and defined as your null hypothesis. Now the other embedded question is your alternative hypothesis. That's what you when you're directly stating or seeking out that something is a change is going to occur, whether positive or negative. And that gets into the terms where you're going to see one and two-tailed tests. Okay. Now a two-tailed test is basically you're interested in things could either go left or right. Literally on the distribution tails. That's what that's referring to. So you're open-minded, basically. You could say you're testing whether or not something is going to decrease to the left or increase to the right. Now, a one-tailed test is when you're very specific. You're saying, no, definitively something more or right tail is going to occur, or something less or negative or left tail is going to occur. So three concepts there in terms of hypothesis testing: the null and alternative hypothesis, the tails, one and two tails, and then the directions, upper and lower. Lower meaning left or less, upper meaning right or more. So that's what those terms mean. Then when you actually do your analysis and you go to accept or reject your null hypothesis, because that's always the first step in any data analysis situation, you're going to be looking at a couple things. Typically, it's always the p-value. So that's when you specify that alpha, or that 0.05, which is usually 1 minus 100, or your 95% level, or it could be 0.01 if it's 99, or it could be 0.10 if it's 90. If your p-value comes in lower, less than, you would accept your alternative hypothesis and reject the null. Okay, but if that number is typically greater, then no, you would accept the null, reject your alternative, and move on. So to do these analyses in Excel, we're going to use the data analysis tool pack pretty much for everything except the one-tailed t-test, which we don't do this week. So I do believe we do that next week or the week after. It's the only one we have to use syntax. The rest is literally through the drop-down menu. You pick the whether it's a paired sample or two sample or one sample t-test or f-test. Sorry, not one sample t-test. I just mentioned that. And it's pretty intuitive. Now the other for this week's assignment, I gave you some pre-built templates that I have generated, and all you have to do is plug in the values in those green turquoise areas from the problem, and the yellow output would spit out what you need. Also on tap for this week is types of error. We have type 1 error and type 2 error, and those are associated with your hypotheses, your null, and your alternative hypotheses. Specifically your null, because if you incorrectly reject your null, you've made an error, or if you incorrectly accepted that error, that null hypothesis, you've also made an error. In terms of type 1 and type 2, type 1 error is basically, think of it as a false positive. Think of type 2 error as a false negative. That's the easiest way to think of those. And so I already sent you out the homework templates. Pay attention to questions 12 and 13 because everyone gets different questions amongst yourselves, just to minimize the integrity and issues that we have with online education. So I think you should be covered. So that's it. Let's have a great week. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. I leave for this cruise that I mentioned on Thursday, so I may be incognito most of Thursday during the day and into the evening, but I'm supposed to, I paid a whole bunch of money for Wi-Fi on the ship, so I won't be disconnected. So, all right, folks, that's it. Any questions, just ask.